Our top story check today takes us to Puerto Rico, where the main epidemiologist of the state, Dr. Melissa Marzin, expressed concern for a syndemic, which occurs when respiratory illnesses are on the rise. Dr. Marzin says a syndemic is a scenario where there is more than one outbreak or more than one epidemic that affects a population. And in Puerto Rico, there's currently roughly 1,500 cases a day of COVID-19 and influenza cases that are affecting mostly the pediatric population. Adding that, deaths and hospitalizations from COVID-19, influenza, and mycoplasma are on the rise on the island. Dr. Marzin says that while masks are not mandatory, she does recommend masking up and getting your COVID vaccines. Well, meantime, as a majority of the U.S. is experiencing high or very high levels of the respiratory viruses, certain over-the-counter children's painkillers are becoming harder and harder to find. Mandy Gaither has more from a pediatrician on what parents should do if they can't get pain medication for their sick child.
Across the U.S., some shelves empty as demand for children's painkillers skyrockets.
I've been doing this for 27 years, and I have never seen this amount of sick kids at once.
Drug maker Johnson & Johnson says the company is experiencing high demand of their children's painkillers and is working to maximize their production capacity. If your child has a fever and acting sick or is in pain, there are other forms of pain-killing medication, says Cleveland Clinic pediatrician Dr. Maureen Almond.
There is a rectal suppository for acetaminophen, and that's actually very helpful if you have a child who's also vomiting.
Almond says parents can also crush up an adult ibuprofen or acetaminophen and mix it with a syrup or juice, but only if their child meets weight requirements.
If your child weighs enough that they typically can take 2 teaspoons of the children's ibuprofen liquid or children's acetaminophen liquid, then they weigh enough to have a crushed pill.
There are other ways to treat fever too, including cold compresses under their arm or back of their neck.
Do be very careful though in infants. Do not do this with infants, especially less than 6 months of age, because they can get too cold.
Almond says seek medical care if the fever lasts longer than 5 days or if an infant less than 2 months of age has a fever. She says to also call a doctor if your child gets dehydrated.
Now, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration says the agency is continuing to monitor supplies of acetaminophen and ibuprofen very closely. The agency says it's working with manufacturers to increase production and to meet all demand. Well, switching gears now, the Dominica Labor Party, or DLP, won a 6th consecutive term in office in Tuesday's general election. That was boycotted by the 2 main opposition parties. But it did not do so with all the seats in the 21-member parliament, as 2 independent candidates won the battles in their constituencies. The DLP had entered the election already, having secured 6 seats since no candidates were nominated in those 6 constituencies by the main United Workers Party, or UWP, or the Dominica Freedom Party, the fledgling Team Unity Dominica, or any independent candidate. Now, of the remaining 15 seats that were up for grabs in the polls, 13 were won by the DLP, bringing their total number of seats to 19. Prime Minister Roosevelt Scarrett, who secured a 5th straight term without having to face the electorate since he was among the 6 unchallenged nomination day, said wins by the independents demonstrated that the elections were credible, free, and fair.
I intend to meet with, first of all, the 2 elected members so that we can chart a new course for the country. I could hear from them the vision for their constituencies and what we can do as a government to support them and to support those constituencies. I also intend to meet with all of the candidates who contested, so I can see how they can participate in the national reset that I have spoken about. And of course, I will meet with the leader of the United Workers Party to discuss with him some of his views where the country is concerned. I am hoping and praying that this election afforded us an opportunity to also have a national reset in respect to our political discourse and engagement. We have to go back to the days when we fought hard with politics, we campaigned hard, we would bruise each other. But at the end of the day, maybe 2 months later, we're back as neighbors and brothers and sisters.
And switching gears now, an old shipwreck dating back to the 1800s has recently been discovered, buried in the sand on Daytona Beach in Florida. In the journey to its discovery, that's kind of the real story here. Mike Springer reports.
Bureau 9 hovers over as state archaeologists work to excavate this find along the coast and Daytona Beach shores. It was unearthed just south of Frank Rendon Park after storms rolled through the area a few weeks ago. This team has been working since Monday to dig, uncover, and analyze what they found.
You can just see from people coming onto the beach to look at it, they're captivated, they're excited, they want to know what the mystery is, and so do we.
Chuck Mead with the St. Augustine Lighthouse Museum, who's leading the excavation, believes it's most likely a cargo or merchant ship from the 1800s, somewhere between 80 to 100 feet long. He says the materials, shape, and the fact that there were so many sailing along the coast then support this theory. Mead says it probably sank during a storm similar to the one that's now brought it back.
This definitely looks like a shipwreck to us. Some people speculated they thought it might be a dock, but this definitely has what you would call ribs, right, or the ship's frames. You can see these big timbers coming up at an angle, and then there's planking on top of those ribs.
The site of the excavation has drawn in onlookers, curious to see some of Florida's maritime history up close.
So awesome. It's so cool. Yeah. I'm so glad that I got to see it. It's very historical.
One that people here will be talking about for quite some time.